here is the interesting bits. Corey was like, it asked me to follow this band on Spotify because I'm not. A, I'm already following them. B, they've been my favorite band for 15 years. And C, I bought a $150 box set and tickets to 2 separate tour dates from them in the last year alone. So what does that tell you about the level of engagement as a customer that Corey has with this band? He's obviously a super engaged fan and a super engaged customer. And he already follows them on Spotify, but he's getting this email to follow this band as if, he just started listening to them. Really doesn't do great for the customer experience here.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. This is episode 218. I'm your host, Jack McCarthy. With me, as always, is my awesome co-host and your awesome co-host, Mr. Ed Isola, account manager, marketing strategist, and frontman of the 502s. Ed, what is up, dude?
Dude, I'm doing well, and I'm super pumped to jump into this, which is almost a little bit of live inspo and feedback on a post in the Indie Pro group, which is going to be kind of exciting because I, for one, am going to be going right off of reading this and giving live commentary. So it'll be the unfiltered opinion of Eddie.
I don't think we've ever done an episode like this, and I'm pretty pumped up about it. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna give the backstory here just to loop you all in on what's going on. So inside of our Indie Pro membership Facebook group, where all of our indies that are part of the Indie Pro membership hang out, that was posted by a gentleman who goes by the name of Corey Lewin. He's an awesome artist, and he's inside of Indie Pro, and I believe it was on last Friday, or possibly Thursday, that he posted in the group and was like, this one's for Jack. I think that he'll find this hilarious. And I know how much he loves generic emails. He shared a screenshot of an email that he actually received from a record label around a band that he loves. And we kind of wanted to pick this apart. First off, I had a good laugh about it. And all of us kind of went back and forth on this thread inside of the Indie Pro group. And we kicked around what was so bad about this email campaign. And then the light bulb went off in my head and was like, we should pick this apart on Creative Juice and talk about it and talk about, more so than just making fun of it, like talk about where the mark was missed and why it was so important and why there was such a big missed opportunity here. This is super fun. Like I said, we've never done anything like this. I want to start with a disclaimer, I guess. I don't want to be a hater on Warner Music who sent this email out. I certainly don't want to come off like a jerk. We've worked with some folks at Warner Music. They're wonderful. They've been great. We've worked with them at the agency for some artists that we've had on board on at IndieX. However, definitely a big missed opportunity here. And I kind of I wanted to position this episode as like a who did this and why, because it's good. Ed, do you want to get into the meat of the email before I talk myself into oblivion about the lead up here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a good disclaimer too, because this is not intended to be a bash fest. It might sound like that, but it's more intended to be like here's what you should do instead of this. And again, I think just kind of low key speaks to the major advantage that indies have. So I'm sure on the page notes or whatever for the episode, we'll drop a screenshot of this, or you can search Coheed in the Facebook group, Indie Pro group, and see this. But it's kind of just like where to start. I think just big picture, looking at this email, it's like immediately the design and the colors, it just doesn't really make sense. I'm gonna guess, is this band like this color scheme? I guess that would be my first question.
No. Give them the description real quick, Ed. Let's just paint a picture here, because this is crazy.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because some people might be listening. So you open this email up, and at the very top, there's a huge, like, bright yellow square that in like white bolded font says, "Follow Coheed in Cambria on Spotify. Embrace your current obsession." And then underneath that, there's a purple. It's like, if you know Barney the dinosaur, it's like that color purple. And like And the button is that color green as well. So there's a purple box right under this yellow one with inside the purple box, there's a pink box that is half made up of an image and half made up of black text that says, you've got Coheed and Cambria on repeat all day, but you're not following them on Spotify. Don't miss out. And then, like I said, that bright neon green button with white text that says follow now. And that's it. There's no name. It's literally, that's the makeup of the email. And so I think before we dive into maybe probably the content and just everything here, the offer, the content, the copy, the button, those all feel like things that can quickly be, that we'll probably touch on. I think a good example here is like the fact that this is so stylized. We've seen time and time again that stylized emails get a lower open rate and a lower click rate. So right off the bat, the fact that they chose to do this formatting to me is like, that's problem number one, right? Like plain text emails where you have maybe a small header and it's just your text on the white backdrop, like an actual email your friend would send you, that gets way better engagement because it feels less spammy. And like I look at this, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to click on that button. Like this doesn't make me want to click on the button. So number one, I think, and then I'll let you go, Jack. We can kind of maybe trade off back and forth. But number one for me is the fact that they went with this stylized, I would say it's status quo stylized email is a mistake because it probably already is driving their open and click rates down, I would think.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great starting point. Not to mention like the color choices in this email, while they might have been meant to be eye-catching, I mean, they certainly caught my eye. In the comments section of this thread, I actually was like, the yellow hurts my eyes and the content hurts my soul. And I think I think that's how I feel about it still. It's really, really brightly colored, definitely hard on the eyes. Also, the white text against the yellow background really doesn't do you any favors as far as readability goes. So yeah, I think like that alone is a good starting point. To give a little more context here of what Corey had to say was the subject of the email was, hello, Coheed and Cambria superfan. If you don't know Coheed and Cambria, they're I don't even know what style or genre I would put them in these days. I guess back in the day, I would lump them into like a pop punk category, but they kind of fall under like, I don't even know, like a progressive rock kind of category. They're very story driven. They have a lot of concept records. They have a whole narrative that they weave throughout all of their discography. Super, super fantastic band. Shout out to Coheed and Cambria. I love them. But the subject line was, hello, Coheed and Cambria superfan. And then the copy is, like Ed said, is to follow your current obsession on Spotify. Now, here's the inside scoop that Corey gave us that I think makes this all the more interesting. And we're not just here to pick apart, the fact that it's a Spotify call to action and that the colors are a little bit whack. Here is the interesting bits. Corey was like, it asked me to follow this band on Spotify because I'm not. A, I'm already following them. B, they've been my favorite band for 15 years. And C, I bought a $150 box set and tickets to 2 separate tour dates from them in the last year alone. So what does that tell you about the level of engagement as a customer that Corey has with this band? He's obviously a super engaged fan and a super engaged customer. And he already follows them on Spotify. But he's getting this email to follow this band as if, he just started listening to them. Really doesn't do great for the customer experience here. Corey is a savvy music marketer for sure, and picked this up and kind of brought it to us as a joke more than anything else. But I think there's a lot of interesting lessons learned here, just from the knowing your fans side of things. Like, why would you allow this email to go out to someone who is a super engaged customer who's bought from you multiple times over? Obviously, there's not a healthy, there's no back end tracking in Spotify that could stop this, that you'd be able to look back and be like, does Corey on my email list follow me on Spotify? Like, you can't do that. So that kind of rules out a little bit of the reason to even try to send this kind of email, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just kind of interesting because I think as we start to go through, we're going to give you our opinions on here's what they could have done differently. I think if you're listening, it's actually a pretty cool activity to try to come up with before maybe, hit pause and take 5 minutes to think about it. Like, what would you have done differently? think it's good practice for getting in the habit of doing your own emails in a way better format. But this feels like the status quo. And so it is just crazy. I hadn't read the description when you just read it, Jack. That's crazy that, one, putting aside the oversight that he already follows them, that like he's already a super, super fan, spending, $150 on a box set plus tickets. I mean, his lifetime value in the last year alone is probably $300-$400, I would guess. So and I don't mean this in a bad way, it almost feels to him probably is a little bit disrespectful that if I'm a super fan of this band and I'm so engaged and I get this email, I'm like, well, they don't care, and that's obviously not going to dissuade Corey from being a fan of the band, but it probably does make him feel a little bit more like, well, there's no personalization here.
I'm a number,
right? Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that's like something you want to avoid at all costs as an artist. And as you grow over time, naturally that may happen, but like it's easily avoidable if this email had, one, the plain text, two, some personalization, right? Like instead of saying, hey, super fan, which essentially probably just means that they got fed some user data from Spotify that implied that Corey has listened to a lot of their music, right? Like you can see at the end of the year on Spotify, people say, oh, I'm in the 0.1% streaming of this artist. Warner probably just got this information from Spotify and said, all right, here's the top whatever percentage. They're super fans. Let's email them this. The fact that was their qualification, it's just kind of like honestly mind-blowing, because you would think that they would have their store set up to be able to actually track the fact that he spent all this money to make him an offer. Because to me, it's like you can easily formatting decide, like Jack said, you can easily make this email way cooler by, one, putting his name in the subject line and saying, hey, Corey, right? Exclamation point, easy enough subject line. Two, making the actual context of this thing, going one step further and saying, hey, our goal here is to take this person who's super engaged and get them to follow us on Spotify. Assuming that Corey wasn't already following him, right? Like that's our goal, is to get them to take this action. It's just a lazy offer. And it doesn't have to be a sales offer, but like any bribe or any offer.
It's a lazy ask. Yeah.
Right. Lazy ask. Right. And it's just kind of like, you could easily say, hey, thanks for doing this. Here's a discount code, right? You can unlock this by going to so-and-so website, following us on Spotify, and you'll get it. There's 27 different platforms that we've used at IndieX that allow you to do that and allow you to have these different kind of, I don't want to say pay for play, but like you take an action, you unlock a certain thing. And that on the highest level feels like it would have been a cooler offer, where if I'm a super fan and I'm getting this thing, it's like, hey, Corey, we really appreciate you listening to our music so much. Like you spin it more than almost anybody else. And because of that, we want to give you this thing. And all you've got to do to unlock it is follow us on Spotify. As a fan, I'm immediately like, absolutely, I'm going to follow you on Spotify because I want that thing, as opposed to, quote unquote, embrace your current obsession, which is like, it's just bad. It's just bad.
Kind of gross and cringy. Yeah. I love what you said about like using an unlock campaign. This comes up in conversation with a lot of artists that I talk to from time to time, where they're like, oh, how can I drive traffic and kind of capture emails or capture followers and incentivize people to do it? And like, that is such a good opportunity to do it when you've got a fan base that is already engaged with you deeply and they're warm and they're on your list. Like that's an opportunity where you could use something like that and, give them a little bit of an incentive for a follow, which like, I don't really think that that's super valuable to you as an artist anyway. Like, I think there could be more there, but since it is incentivizing a purchase, like at least it's something, and it's giving fans something else. Like it's incentivizing the follow, but it's also incentivizing the purchase. It's giving fans something on behalf of the follow or in exchange for the follow rather. And yeah, I totally agree. I think that could be like, that's kind of like a missed opportunity right there. And that's an easy one. I also love what you said about the subject line. Like my brain immediately when reading this was like, ew, like hello, Coheed and Cambria super fan. Like if I were a huge, like a Coheed super fan and I got an email like this, like the subject line that would catch my attention would be like, hey, it's Claudio, which is the lead singer of Coheed and Cambria. If I got an email like that and I saw that it was coming from their email address, like I would immediately open it, like very easy tweaks to make there. Something that also drives me absolutely crazy, and I see this with a lot a lot of label artists that are doing email marketing. And I think we touched on this on the episode where we talked about big email marketing mistakes. So I'll link to that in the show notes. I think we talked about it on that episode, but I can't stand when there's no personalization in emails. Like, it drives me crazy that there was not even a first name anywhere in this email. Like, that drives me bananas.
Dude, it's so crazy because I feel like that is like they have that information, right? There's no way they don't have the first names of these people, because I'm sure on their website or on Spotify they have the first name. So,
well, he's a customer in this case, so like they definitely have his first name.
Yeah, and it's just like, yeah, just this email would immediately be better if it said his name at the subject line, or at the even in the terrible bright yellow. At least if his name was up there, it would be better than just block copy and different formatting. The other thing too that I think is really kind of logistically or formatting wise and offer wise, I think we've kind of gone through a little bit what they could have done differently in the personalization stuff and things they could have done to make this much better. I think the other thing here too is like there could be a counter argument against what we're saying that's like, well, this wasn't them, right? Like, this was their label.
Of course, yeah.
So maybe they didn't even see it. And I understand, like, you get to Warner Music Group, you know, maybe people are saying they haven't seen it, it's their label. But I think that's why it's so important, because as indies, if you're learning this stuff now and like you did take the time to think about, hey, here's what I would have done, or you're listening to this and realizing here's how I would set the email up if I wanted to do it, or the campaign up if I wanted to do it. The goal, I think, for everybody music-wise listening is to eventually grow your brand and your band to a place where you have additional people on your team. That doesn't mean it's a label, but over time, the goal would be like, hey, we're getting big. Now we have so-and-so on our team. And that's something I'm starting to experience, where we're having additional team members where maybe they draft the email, then I put my spin onto it, or that, you know, that kind of thing, where every email isn't in actuality always coming from me for something like this, right? Where it's a call to action for a follow. But if you know what you want and what you don't want, you can provide these clear guidelines to people over time that come onto your team. So I'm sure that Coheed and Cambria probably hasn't done any email marketing ever. So I'm sure they probably were like, if you think that sounds good, that's fine with us, right? So they wouldn't know that. But if you know these things and you know these best practices, you can kind of dictate how your brand is represented via email, which is super, super important. And I think stresses why it's good to know this stuff now.
Well said. Yeah, I think that's a really great point. Kind of underlines the idea of like, not only learning how to do this and how to do email marketing well, or how to talk to your fans in a way that is authentic, but also just like learning what your preferred voice is as an artist, and how, you know, your marketing has that stamp to it and doesn't stray so far from what people can expect from you, because otherwise you end up with stuff that, like you said, Ed, kind of just like feels very status quo. Another thing that I want to touch on as well is, this is I think a pretty good example of where some of the like data dark spots or black holes of a platform, like a streaming platform like Spotify, where we really don't have a ton of access of data on the back end, can really hurt your marketing efforts when it comes to how you talk to your fans. Like, because they didn't know that Corey was already following them, and, you know, realistically didn't connect the dots through the data that he was also the customer that had spent a lot of money on them in the last year. There's no way that they could have necessarily made a pivot to avoid this. And I think that's part of the kind of like the level of caution that I would recommend when it comes to making decisions, marketing decisions based on data that comes from a place where you don't really have the data. If you're making all of your marketing decisions around your streaming numbers and your followers, then you can get into, you know, traps like this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. And it is a little surprising because now I think that Shopify and Spotify integrate in some capacity, or at least you can list your products on there. So it is interesting that they didn't think to cross-check who is on Spotify, who is on Shopify. Let me kind of see what's up with that. But again, it speaks to the fact that maybe the people running this weren't thinking about that or weren't, thinking it from that angle and kind of were just like, here's my objective. Let me try to get followers. That's my job here. Let me do that job. But that's where if you do know all the different parts of your business and you're smart enough to think, hey, this person, my top fans here, maybe they are customers. I should never be sending emails to people without cross-checking, all the different things. Or ideally, I probably would have taken the emails from Spotify, uploaded them to Drip or whatever, my autoresponder, tagged them, and then gone from there and got everything into one spot. I think probably would have been like the ultimate route. But it's just being aware, best practices on formatting are important, but being aware of, like you said, Jack, how you want your brand to come across, like having that personalized touch is super important for a lot of indies. And then putting that into action and making sure that you're speaking to people via email like you would speak to your friend. I think that's really important. Even as your list size grows, it doesn't take a lot to think about, hey, if I had 10 followers and my friend followed me on Spotify or didn't follow me on Spotify, but he's bought $200 worth of merch, how would I ask him to follow me on Spotify, right? And then you just take that like isolated case and you blow it up into, millions of fans like Coheed and Cambria probably has like followers on Spotify. But it's like the steps they're taking are still the same thing as if someone was asking their friend directly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I agree with you. Like, had there been that level of segmentation, like say there had been like, pre-save campaigns or email for follow campaigns that they had run in the past where they did have that data available that they could upload and cross-checking, kind of make the assumption that these were the people that followed them on Spotify and almost bridge that dark spot there and have that in their, in their email marketing platform. That would be that's another great opportunity for like those kind of social unlocks to give you almost like assumptive data to work on. But to your point, like in addition to that, yeah, like it all comes down to the way that you message with the people or communicate with the people that are at varying levels of, fandom or relationship with you. This is someone that is a diehard kind of customer, and a heartfelt sort of push here would have been probably better than this, graphic heavy, very bright and somewhat off-putting messaging where it could have led with like, hey, Corey, I know you've been like really supportive of this band in the last year. I know you picked up, this box set item. I know you were out on the road with us twice in the last tour, and that's amazing. We're trying to get our music heard more.
Like we've got a new single coming out and we want to get everybody following us, right? Like that would be that'd be perfectly fine.
Yeah. That's yeah, exactly. Yeah, super simple. Or even like we want to be more of a part of your everyday life. If you're not following us on Spotify and listening, like we'd love you to come, check out our music there and hang out and, shoot us a reply in this email and let us know when you listen to our music. Like what part of your day are you listening to Coheed? Like that's the kind of stuff that is heartfelt. It would make people feel like, okay, like this is cool. I'll probably follow if I don't already. And I'll probably reply back to this email. And then you've got a deeper engaged fan instead of a fan that screenshotted an email and put it in a music marketing mastermind group to talk about it,
Yeah, man. And this, I think, circles back to just email practices in general. This is my last thought on it, like based off something you just said, was segmentation is so important. Like that email Jack said, he said, hey, you've bought this product and you don't follow us on Spotify. That might sound like a lot to have to cross-check, but if you're uploading lists and CSV files into your autoresponder the right way, then all that means is, all right, you've got your store hooked up to your autoresponder, right? So you automatically will be able to go through and say, has bought this product. So that portion's done. And then if Spotify sends you a list, I'm sure it will tell you if this person follows you or does not follow you, right? And so then you upload the people that don't follow you and tag them as do not follow on Spotify. And then you just pick those two filters and you email all 20,000 people that have bought but don't follow you. It's logic based, but it is so important because it becomes an easy task when things are segmented right at the highest level or at the lowest level. Like if you're just starting out, pay attention to your segmentation and try to get comfortable with it, because over time, you'll want that in there because you'll want to end up doing things like this or making certain asks that only need to go to certain segments, and you don't want to piss people off by doing something dumb like this where you're like, hey, you don't follow me. It's like, well, actually I do. And I'm also one of your biggest fans. So thanks for that, you know?
Right. I think you said it well, that like, that's a good kind of preparation for features that you do have now, features that you may not have right now, and future features that might be available in the future around, you know, data or lists that you could have. And I think it's good to think about it on all spectrums. Like right now, if you're working with dark spots where you just don't have any access to that follower data, maybe you haven't run any unlock kind of campaigns, so you can't even make assumptive guess, then like, don't say things like, you're not following me, you know, like don't say that, like leave that out of the message altogether. That's really easy. Like this is an easy remedy. So for people that might be wondering like, well, like I don't have that data from Spotify, like there was no way of getting that. And you know, that's the usual occurrence. Like having that data is not, it's a black hole. So then don't use that language. Like think about the way that you're messaging based on the information that you do or do not have. And that's kind of what I was getting at and was really nagging at me when I read this, was like, oh man, like a lot of what I found to be kind of like a falling short in this marketing campaign was the disconnect between the data that they did and did not have and the way that the message was sent.
So what Jack is saying is just be honest in emails, right? Like don't take guesses. Just legitimately speak to people as if you don't know, that's okay. Just say, hey, you may or may not follow us, but if you don't, here's this thing, right? Like do this. You don't have to lie and assume. So good point. Honesty is a good policy, even in email.
Yeah, that protects you. That way, if you don't have the data and you're kind of shooting from the hip, you're not missing the mark, and it will prevent you from sending out an email that kind of just goes over people's heads or ends up in spam or ends up in trash and actually can get somebody who engages with you. And you don't piss off a customer. I think that that's kind of like the biggest lesson learned here.
Absolutely. I think that's well said. And hopefully this has been insightful to y'all listening. Like we always say this, the bar is very low, but this really demonstrates it, I think, unfortunately.
You know, like this was fun. And again, like I hope that this wasn't like a total shaming. It was more so meant to be demonstrative of like what you could do differently and what you can do when you see stuff like this. I know like at IndieX, we have a lot of conversations with artists that are growing, and in a lot of ways they're seeing the marketing that some of their idols and their favorite artists or bands are doing, and they're wondering like, is this the right way to go? And in a lot of ways, it's not. So this is the kind of stuff to be paying attention to. Is like, look critically at the emails that are coming to you from your favorite artists, make a swipe file and an anti-swipe file, and pick apart the things that are cool and then pick apart the things that could be done a little bit differently. This is kind of the audit process that we do all the time here at Indepreneur. And it's a lot of fun. So I hope you guys took something out of this and learned something from it.
Cheers.
And for Coheed and Cambria, keep emailing your fans. You absolutely should keep emailing your fans. Just tighten up the wording a little bit with your team, and I think you guys will crush it. And go give Corey a big hug, because this was a super fun episode. We'll catch you guys next time on Creative Juice. Peace out, Indies.